What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody out there in the podcast world? You know the voice, you know who it is. I am your host, Justin Emery. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of Just in Time. I have some great guests lined up for this week. As I mentioned on the previous episode, I have Adam Kimmelman, the NHL.com deputy manager. He will be joining me to talk about playoff hockey and some Golden Knights hockey. As you might or might not know, I am based in Vegas. I live in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. With that being said, obviously the Knights are a huge topic of discussion across town, so he will be joining me to discuss that. And I will also be having Dan Lust join us. He is a national sports analyst and attorney. He will be joining me to discuss Vanessa Bryant's wrongful death lawsuit against the helicopter company in regards to Kobe's death. So we will have a jam-packed episode this week for you guys. The NHL playoffs are by far the most exciting playoffs, just from the proved energy of play, as well as how routinely you can see a lower seed beat a higher seed. Very seldom in the NBA will you see a 8 seed beat a 1 seed in a 7-game playoff series. My first guest on the program, kicking it off, NHL.com deputy managing editor and host of the NHL Draft Class podcast, Adam Kimmelman is joining the show. Thank you, Adam, for taking some time to join us tonight.
Absolutely, Justin. My pleasure to be on with you.
Now, we got playoff fever here in Vegas, especially now that we just finished a 5-3 win over the Flames. So we're going to be looking forward to that, and a deep team is only going to get deeper with Alex Tuch returning to practice and Mark Stone expected to be back by the playoffs. He's week to week. How dangerous is the Golden Knights team right now?
To me, they're the best team in the Pacific Division. I know they're in that dogfight now with Edmonton and Calgary. Looks like they've started to right the ship a little bit. But to me, they're head and shoulders above anybody else in that division. And that was even before they got, arguably the best goaltending tandem in the league with Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner. They get a healthy Mark Stone back. That just is going to make them even better. They're going to get Alex Tuch back to add to their depth offensively. They still have questions on defense, but, to me, after St. Louis and Colorado, maybe Dallas, they're definitely the best team in their division. They're still an upper echelon team in the Western Conference, and they're a team that is very capable of going a long way in the playoffs.
You brought the name up, so I'll just follow up. The VGK, they brought in a top-tier goalie with Lehner to back up Fleury. However, he's 3-0 as the Knights goalie. Did they inadvertently create a goalie controversy for themselves?
I don't think so. I think both guys are very professional. I think both guys know exactly what their role is going to be. Marc-Andre Fleury has, in very short order, become a Las Vegas hockey icon. It's going to be really hard to move him out of that number one spot just because he's done so well in the 2.5, almost 3 full years he's been there. He has helped them become what they have become and what they are. Is he having the best of seasons right now? No, but there is nothing preventing him from his next game out, turning that switch on and becoming the guy that got them to the Stanley Cup final 2 years ago, the guy who got them to the division title last year, and in a lot of ways has helped them get to where they are in the standings right now. Robin Lehner is just going to buttress that effort and be just as good for them. What they've done is they've given Peter DeBoer an option that he can feel confident in and his teammates can feel confident in any time, no matter whose name he puts on that he puts in net.
Definitely, and they've been hot as of late, specifically more even over the last 2 months, basically since they've replaced Gallant with Peter DeBoer, as you had mentioned. Now, is that a coincidence that they just decided to take off once they changed the head coach? Was Gallant's message just getting stale to them and they needed a new voice? What do you think the coaching change is what prompted their increase in play?
I think certain times, and this isn't a slight towards Gerard Gallant, I think he's an excellent coach and he's going to get a job somewhere else in the NHL whenever he really wants one. That option's going to be there for him. He's certainly proven, not just in Vegas, but in Florida as well, that he's a very good NHL coach. What happened in Vegas, it's really hard to say. They were still going well when they decided to make the move. But I think sometimes just a different voice saying very similar things can be the difference. And maybe they just needed to hear it from a different voice, and that's helped spark them. They're better defensively. They're allowing fewer shots under Peter DeBoer than they were under Gerard Gallant, and that's a big part of it. And then, you add in bringing in a Robin Lehner and solidifying your goaltending. That's going to make any team better.
We're going to switch a little bit to some recent news that just came out yesterday. Cody Glass underwent successful surgery, and he's out for the remainder of the season and through the playoffs. However, he's expected back by the start of training camp, ready to go. Now, the preseason buzz around him was that everybody was excited to finally see the first draft pick in franchise history make his debut. He had an all right season before he got hurt, but what can the Knights fans expect next year and going forward from this kid?
I think they're just going to have to be patient with him. Look, guys who are as big as he is, who are as talented as he is, they still need to get bigger. They still need to get stronger. Cody Glass is listed at 6'2" and 192 pounds. But you have to think he's going to get stronger. He's going to use this opportunity to get, if not making his legs stronger, making his upper body stronger, which is really what he needs. And with that strength is going to come confidence. With that confidence to get into the physical battles, to get in the dirty areas of the ice, he's going to become a better player, a more productive player offensively. If I'm a Vegas Golden Knights fan, I am very excited for what a healthy Cody Glass can bring to my lineup, not just next season, but for seasons plural going forward. He is a very talented young man who just, he needs time to grow and develop. Not everybody comes into the league at 18 like a Connor McDavid or a Sidney Crosby or an Alex Ovechkin and just dominates. Most guys need 2, 3, 4 years to reach their full potential. So, you can't expect Cody Glass to come in to be a 75, 80-point guy next season just because, he got his knee fixed. He's going to need time to develop, but with the proper amount of patience, I think fans will be very well rewarded with what this big, talented, skates well, head for the game. He's a very promising prospect who looks like he's going to be a very good NHL player for a very long time.
Yeah, the buzz around town for him is growing every game that he had played, and it's just a matter of time until he potentially gets the crown to Vegas hockey that Fleury has right now.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that, look, there's a lot of hype surrounding him when you're the first draft pick of any team, and not to mention they had 3 first-rounders. He's the only one left. There is a lot of pressure on him to be something, to be a significant part of what they're going to do in the future. And I still think he's going to be. I think fans just need to be a little patient. I think the coaching staff and the development group there will be very good with him, and they'll bring him along in a way that helps him become the player he's going to be. He's got a very bright future. I don't think they're going to rush him. If it's determined he needs more time in the American League next season, I'm sure that's where he'll start or spend some time if he needs it. But the future is very bright for Cody Glass.
Now, continuing the topic of prospects, I'm not sure that there's anybody that covers the draft as closely as you do. Now, we can't predict exactly where each team's going to fall yet, but assuming the Knights fall somewhere in the, say, 18 to 24, 25, 26 range, who could they be looking at with their first-round pick this season?
I think if I'm them, I'm looking at defense, and there are a couple of good defensemen that could be available in that spot. One of them is Jeremy Poirier, who plays for St. John in the Quebec League. He's, I had a chance to see him on tape, obviously, and also in person at the CHL Top Prospects game out in Hamilton, Ontario last month, and you just can't take your eyes off him. He moves so well with the puck, a great offensive mind for the game, very active. He'll jump up in the play and create offense. Obviously, a guy who needs to get a little bit stronger, but he's a willing defensive player. He's definitely no slouch in his own end. He can play defensively, but he's very much a puck-moving, outstanding skater, offensive-minded defenseman. Another guy is Ryan O'Rourke playing for Sault Ste. Marie in the Ontario League. He's another guy, a little bit more physical, stronger, but again, a very good offensive upside. Plays the game the way the NHL wants its defensemen to play. Guys who, are responsible defensively, who move the puck, who make the good, smart first pass out of the zone. That's what Ryan O'Rourke will give you. And then a little bit off the radar is a Russian player named Shakir Mukhamadullin, I think is how you say his last name. He's playing against men in the Continental Hockey League, big and strong at 6'3" and 178 pounds. He really stood out at the World Junior A Challenge in December, playing for Russia. He scored the winning goal, the championship winning goal. He's a guy that scouts are really enamored with. They want to see some more of. But he's a guy, if you want to take a shot late in the first round, he's a guy that definitely should be available and could be, a guy with a little bit of patience, develops into a really good top pair, top four NHL defenseman.
You heard it there, Knights fans. They need defensemen. Adam's got the list set up for them. Hopefully we can get some Stanley Cup action between the Knights and the team that my next question is going to ask you about. Now, I understand that we're in Vegas and we're talking about the Knights, but for someone that's around the Flyers like you are, it would be malpractice for myself not to ask you about the Flyers. Winners of 9 straight, 12 of the last 14, I believe. And earlier this week, I believe it was Bleacher Report came out with a graphic that had the Flyers projected to win the Stanley Cup with the best odds. Could we be potentially looking at a Knights-Flyers Stanley Cup?
Well, I'll tell you what. I know my wife and kids are very excited at the thought of a Vegas Flyers Stanley Cup final. We do Thanksgiving vacation every year in Las Vegas, so the fact that they could have a chance to go back, they would push to follow that series a little bit. So I know my son and my wife and my daughter are very excited at that potential. However, it's a long way before we get from here to there. For the Flyers, they are playing their best hockey at the right time of the season. They've won 9 straight. They're tied for first in the Metropolitan Division. Everything seems to be clicking for them. Special teams has been very good, especially their penalty kill, which is significantly improved from last season. But I think the biggest thing is they're getting solid, dependable goaltending on a night-to-night basis. Carter Hart has really emerged as a star in the league. He has won 7 in a row himself. He had a little bit of a hiccup where he wasn't playing well on the road. He seems to be past that. He's won a couple games here on the road. He's looked very good. He's been almost unstoppable at home. People forget last year they went through 8 different starting goaltenders. No team in the history of the NHL had ever done that before. Now they've got Carter Hart and a healthy Brian Elliott, and the players in front of them, much like in Vegas, they have confidence, whoever is back there, that the guy who is in net is going to make every important save, and it allows them to be a little more creative, to take another chance offensively, to make a play or try a play that maybe they wouldn't try if they didn't trust the goaltender behind them. That's the biggest difference for the Flyers this season. They have confidence in their goaltending, and Carter Hart really looks like a guy who's emerging as a star in this league, maybe a budding superstar.
Hopefully your words speak it into existence. Adam Kimmelman, NHL.com deputy manager, host of NHL Draft Class podcast. Adam, let them know where they can find you on social media give you a follow.
Oh, I'm at NHL Adam K on Twitter, and I'd really appreciate it if people tuned into the podcast, NHL Draft Class. It's available anywhere you get your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify. You can also find it on NHL.com/podcast. We're doing them once a month now as we get closer to the draft. Myself and my co-host, Mike Morial, will be doing them every week. So anything you want to know about the NHL draft, that to me is the best place to get all your information. We'll have scouts, we'll have players, we'll have coaches. We will give you all the information we can to get you as well prepared as you can for the NHL draft at NHL Draft Class. So
anywhere where you get your podcasts at, rate and review, leave him a 5-star review. It is among the best hockey talk you will find anywhere. Adam, thanks for joining the show, and look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Absolutely. Anytime, Justin.
So I really would like to thank Adam for taking the time to join us. He is a very busy person, especially around this time of the year, getting ready for the NHL Amateur Draft in June. So we're going to pivot directions a little bit. My next guest is Dan Lust. As I had mentioned, he is a national sports law analyst and an attorney in New York City. He has a very great insight on the technical legality matters in the sporting world. Next on the line with us is Dan Lust, national sports law analyst at catch him on Twitter at Sports Law Lust. Dan, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, Justin. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. Now, the main reason I'm having you on is because I wanted to talk about the Vanessa Bryant wrongful death lawsuit that's going on right now. So Vanessa is suing the helicopter company Island Express Helicopters for the wrongful death of Kobe and the other passengers. So for our listeners out there that are not attorneys, can you kind of give us a little bit of what that means and what kind of burden of proof she needs to do for this to succeed?
Yeah, so I'm happy to break it down. And Justin, just to correct one thing you said, it's actually an important legal point. Vanessa Bryant at this point is suing on behalf of Kobe and Gianna. I think there was some information out there that she had been suing on behalf of the other passengers, but I don't think that's confirmed at this point. So, the general gist of a wrongful death lawsuit, there's a version of this in all 50 states. Basically, the way that somebody, if God forbid, I passed away, that my wife could be able to sue whoever caused my death if it was, it was avoidable, as is being alleged here, and my wife could collect on the money I would have made if not for the fact that I passed away. So it's a mechanism that kind of looks into the future, what Kobe would have made moving forward, and not based on what he's made in the past. So, you hit on it really, Justin. This is a lawsuit that's brought by Vanessa Bryant that's seeking to, recover whatever funds could have. It's called the pecuniary loss, and there's, it's also some emotional loss from their passing. Her, obviously Kobe and Gianna, and she's suing in particular the pilot of this Island Express helicopter, as well as the Island Express helicopter company itself. So those are the only two parties that are named in that lawsuit. I'm sure Justin will get into it. She could have sued maybe some other people, but those are the only two that she's named in her particular lawsuit.
Yes, they are, and I appreciate you pointing that out previously because I did read that it was on all the passengers. I'm glad that you clarified that. Now, the helicopter in question lacked some of the proper certifications to be flying in these conditions. What kind of issues does that bring about for this company?
Yeah, so I know what you're pointing out. It's a great point. So this Island Express, the company itself didn't have the proper licensing to be flying, having a helicopter fly under poor visual conditions, as it required it's a special instrumentation license. So that company didn't have the proper licensing. So at the end of the day, right, in order to be, to have fault for this accident for the helicopter company, you need to, one evidence that Vanessa Bryant would point to is the fact that they didn't have a license means that maybe they weren't properly training their employees in that regard. Maybe their helicopters weren't perfectly suited for flight. The reason they have these licenses is so, the helicopter pilots or the companies themselves or their employees would be properly trained, maybe to track weather patterns and making sure that they're not violating federal law by flying under those conditions. So it's what we call in the law, it's a per se violation. If they're flying in poor weather conditions and they don't have that license, that's a per se violation and something that, Vanessa Bryant's attorneys would be pointing to very quickly.
So back in 2015, the same pilot was reprimanded by the FAA for flying into airspace of zero visibility. So if the pilot has a track record of negligence and the helicopter that the company has doesn't have proper certifications, from the outside looking in, this should kind of solidify her case, shouldn't it?
Solidify is a tough word. I mean, these two examples that you point out make these two defendants of the complete pool of defendants the most obvious ones. And I should just say, the other people that could have been sued and still, Justin, may be sued are the manufacturer of this Sikorsky helicopter, and the other one is potentially air traffic control, which is backed by the FAA, that's the federal government. So we're not talking about those two, right? And there's no indication that those guys are going to get sued yet, but just by the fact of the helicopter, maybe it malfunctioned. We don't know that. The NTSB said in their preliminary investigation that it did not, and the NTSB didn't note any fault on air traffic control. But to go back to your point, in the law, right, this is something that someone would have done wrong in the past. Justin, if you were to get into a car accident, could the court, in a trial, when you were being put on trial for, rear-ending someone, Could the court show evidence that you rear-ended someone in the past? I mean, that's something called habit in the law. It's very rarely allowed to be used in court. But the fact that, in theory, right, he's violating the same this 2015 offense for flying in poor weather conditions for this pilot. It's something that's probably relevant to the case, but something that probably wouldn't make its way into the courtroom. But different than the license, which was an actual violation that occurred on the day that Kobe passed. So it's by no means an open and shut case. It doesn't necessarily solidify their full negligence, but by nature of the fact that the company didn't have the proper license, that's a per se violation. So there might be some negligence, but at the end of the day, Justin, in these cases, you have to show that the negligence contributed in some meaningful way to the crash. So, it's not an open and shut case by any means, but, those are your two easy targets right off the bat.
Dan Lust, national sports law analyst, joining the program. Now, is there any possibility that the families of the other passengers could potentially go after Bryant's estate?
Yes. That's, kind of the unsaid thing at this point. I mean, so we had this, beautiful memorial ceremony on February 24th. And on that same day is when Vanessa Bryant drops this lawsuit, this wrongful death lawsuit. So many had kind of wondered why she might have been so quick to file this lawsuit, right? You have a 2-year statute of limitations in the state of California. It's very rare, especially with a high-profile case like this, to file suit so quickly and really within a month of someone's passing. And that's, obviously, Justin, because there's a grieving period. You got to get it in state in order. When Kobe Bryant's worth $600 million, getting a state of that magnitude in order, it takes time. So why would someone file suit that quickly? There's a battle that's going to be fought, Justin, here in the court of public opinion. Vanessa Bryant filing suit so publicly in the way she did on the day that she has such a huge platform on the memorial will now make it a little bit tougher for these other families of this helicopter crash to want to swallow this pill and go after a legend like Kobe Bryant. Had Vanessa not filed suit that quickly, it probably would have been a little bit easier, at least in this court of public opinion, to sue someone like a Kobe Bryant. So now these families are going to have to make this decision, right? Will they sue Kobe? There's nothing that points right now that Kobe did anything wrong. But by nature of the fact that Kobe organized this flight, right? He is the one that set up this helicopter company. He's the one that hired this pilot. And Justin, you and I are here talking about potential liability on behalf of Island Express Helicopters, the company, and this pilot. Who was the one that kind of brokered this flight? Kobe Bryant. Kobe is the one that put these families, on a flight that was on a plane with a helicopter pilot that might have done something wrong, that might have had a history of doing something wrong. So in this kind of battle, Justin, I'm sure we'll get into this, in this battle to find these big pockets to pay for the loss of people's life, Kobe Bryant was worth $600 million at the time of his passing. It might surprise you, Justin, that Kobe Bryant might have been worth more than this helicopter company itself. So I wouldn't rule it out, and especially, just at the end of the day, right, if someone's the breadwinner of a family and they pass away, God forbid, that family's going to want to try to get every single asset they could go after to try to make up for their financial loss, and that's seemingly the case that we have here.
Completely understandable, and you and I had talked before about the insurance coverage only being $50 million. There's no possibility that's anywhere near enough. So what's the next page to turn on that issue?
Yeah, that's really where the battle is going to be fought. So what reports are out now that Island Express Helicopters has a $50 million total in insurance coverage. We don't know how it's broken up exactly, but it's $50 million total. The other person that we named is this pilot, right? He's being sued in his individual capacity. He's not going to have that much money, just using common sense. So if Kobe's worth $600 million, you'd have to think Kobe's going to make a lot more money, would have made a lot more money in his lifetime. So the problem is when you have limited insurance coverage, it's not $50 million per person that sues. It's $50 million total. So for the next person that brings a lawsuit, be it, one of the other family members that passed away, surviving family members, that $50 million is going to be divided between Kobe and Kobe's family and whoever else sues. So that's a really big battle to be fought. Courts, they have to come up with these creative solutions to divvy up that piece of the pie. So that's why in these next round of lawsuits, and to the earlier point that we talked about, why it wouldn't shock me for someone like a Kobe Bryant to get brought into a suit. if $50 million is all that's on the table for these families that are devastated by the loss of family members, it's all the more reason to bring someone in like a Kobe Bryant, to bring in FAA, air traffic control, and to bring in the manufacturer of the helicopter. Why not throw a dart? If there's no liability on Kobe, so be it. But, the attorneys of these family members that were lost in the helicopter crash, it makes sense for them to try to sue as many people as they can.
Now, would Vanessa Bryant be smart in taking a settlement if it's offered rather than pursue litigation? Because from everything you just said, it doesn't appear that she's ever going to get the amount that would actually equal the value.
Yeah, I would think so. So if there's only $50 million on the table, let's say for a second that no other families sue, right? And you don't have to have a court battle to figure out where that $50 million should go. It would make sense for Vanessa Bryant to probably sue. This helicopter company, Island Express, they suspended operations indefinitely within a week of the crash. So it looks like a company that's not ready to fight this lawsuit. They might just want to wind up shop. So it would make sense if $50 million is on the table to settle it. But, Justin, I just think realistically, these other families are going to sue. It's just they have 2 years to do it. Maybe there's no reason to rush. So I don't think a settlement's going to be on the table so quickly because, this helicopter company and the insurance company knows that additional claims are probably going to be brought. So I don't think a settlement's going to be done so quickly. But I do think it makes sense from Vanessa Bryant's perspective.
Dan Luss, national sports law analyst, joining the program. We're going to stay in the basketball realm. Last week, LeBron James said that he wasn't going to play any games if there were no fans in the arena. Now, he began walking that statement back on Wednesday, and you actually had wrote a piece about LeBron James and the coronavirus. Can you just explain a little bit of the potential legal ramifications if athletes were to refuse to play because of this?
Sure, of course. It's a really fascinating legal point here. So, Justin, the developing news, I guess, is that Woj is reporting that either the NBA is going to play in empty arenas or they're going to basically put the season on hiatus. So let's go under that first option here, and that's really this LeBron realm we're talking about. LeBron was asked over the weekend whether what he thought about playing in front of empty arenas, which now looks like it's a very distinct possibility. LeBron said he doesn't want to play in empty arenas because he plays for the fans, and there has to be fans there for him to play. So within basically 72 hours, LeBron completely switched gears. And part of that is, I pointed out, I'm sure others pointed out as well, but under, the NBA uniform player contracts, there's only certain reasons you could sit out. One is an injury, another is a death. We see it sometimes, right, if someone has a child, they're on paternity. One of the reasons has never been the potential fear of an infection, right? Guys have flu-like symptoms, and guys have to play. Their teammates have to play. They can't sit at home. So there is no real past precedent to allow someone to sit out for potential fear of infection, right? LeBron not wanting to play in front of empty stands, that seems to be something that would basically hold him in breach of his contract. Now LeBron is kind of saying, you know what, I'll play if the NBA says I should play. This is recent. This is in the past day. If the NBA says that they're going to be fanless stadiums, I will play. But the problem is now we have a very weird scenario kind of looming because, Justin, if NBA players have to play, right, and there's no NBA fans in the stands, NBA players could still be at risk of spreading this coronavirus. So it's a big legal issue because you have to figure out what's a justifiable excuse for breaching your contract, right? If the National Guard and there's a national fear and there's a directive from the president that everyone's to be stayed in quarantine, right? That's a reason for breaching your contract, right? For not showing up to play or not showing up for work. But if there's this kind of gray zone of guidance like we have now, the NBA is going to be in a tough position of basically telling their players, hey, come to the arena and risk fear of infection or be in potential breach of contract. And, Justin, just a quick note, right now, I don't want to be speaking in hypotheticals, the Chinese Basketball Association is telling Americans that are under contract, either you come back and play for us right now, or we're going to hold you in breach and we're going to ban you from all international competition for 3 years. So that's on the table now, and it's essentially what the NBA is thinking of doing if they're going to, have these crowdless NBA games. So definitely a fascinating scenario to watch.
Oh, yeah, this is definitely something to keep your eye on and see how it unfolds. I personally am kind of intrigued to see what it's going to look like on television tomorrow, the Warriors game without a crowd.
I am as well, Justin. I don't know if we'll get there because we see the Jazz Thunder game tonight was just postponed for suspicious reasons. I have to think it's coronavirus induced.
Oh, that's definitely something to keep your eye on. Dan Luss, National Sports Law Analyst. You can catch him on Twitter at Sports Law Luss. Dan, thank you for joining the show. I appreciate it, and we look forward to having you back on again in the future.
Of course, Justin. Happy to come on anytime.
I appreciate Dan taking the time to join us, and I look forward to having him again in the future when we need some legal insight. That will wrap it up for episode 2. Follow on social media at Justin Emery Show across all platforms. You will hear from me next week.